This story is particularly tragic. I don't think it is the most prominent news story right now. It's not, but I do think it's one of the most important. Sure, there's stories about Jussie Smollett and Jack Dorsey, and we'll get into that stuff. And if you're listening to the podcast, you probably already heard it. This is a story about a father who is going to pick up his son. There was a court-ordered arrangement between the two parents of the child. When he went to the house, the mother was withholding the child from him. The man was aggressive. His name was Chad Reed, but he wasn't violent in any way. He told the man, I will subpoena you. I will subpoena them. All of a sudden, the woman's new significant other comes out with a 9mm carbine. It appears to be a 9mm based on the magazine size, but I believe it was a 9mm carbine. It's basically a rifle that fires a smaller caliber round. I know, gun nuts, give me the proper definition and break it all down in the comment section. But the point is, he comes out with a gun. Immediately, this guy, Chad Reed, who's there to pick up his son legally, gets up in the face of this other guy whose name is Kyle. Starts saying things like, do it, or whatever. The guy with the gun then fires into the ground. The father, Chad Reed, then grabs the gun. They struggle, spin around, separate by what appears to be about 5 to 7 feet. The man, Kyle, then puts 2 rounds into the father who is there to pick up his son, killing him. He drops to the ground. As Andrew Branca says, it appears that it was a hit to his central nervous system, which took him out, dropped him almost immediately, and then he did die. Now, there's a lot of arguments over who is right in this context. I look at this and I immediately say this. There's a lot of questions about justified use of self-defense. Someone coming on your property, this guy probably not involved in whatever legal dispute they had, or, whoever's property it is. I'm going to tell you this. You're a father, and you have a custody arrangement for your child, your son, and you go to pick him up, and your ex, the child's mother, be it your wife or otherwise, refuses. I mean, is that not kidnapping? Could the father now be acting in defense of his child who's being withheld from him? I don't believe this father had any intent to cause any physical harm to anybody. I believe that when this significant other came out with his gun, it was a direct threat to a father who was legally entitled to be there to get his son. And he didn't raise his fists. He closed the distance between him and this guy. Let's read this and break it down. But I'm totally on the side of the father who was there to pick up his child. It's a crazy story. It is. But I think this is a good example of, as much as I believe in gun rights, I believe this is a story of how broken our child custody, family court system is. And maybe this dad could have just backed off and said, I'm calling the sheriff as soon as he came out with the gun, and the sheriff would have resolved it. But there's a lot of questions here. So let's get into the story. Chad Reed shooting. Evidence supports manslaughter, not justification. Neither self-defense, defensive dwelling, nor defensive property appear to justify this shooting. This is a really shocking story. I believe it happened on November 10th. The video has gone viral. There's been a lot of people arguing that the boyfriend or whatever of the ex-wife or the mother of the child was justified in defending his property from a guy. I don't think so. I think they were withholding this man's child. Anyway, let me read and then we'll break this down. Branca says, as is so often in the case, there is unfortunately a lot of confusion about how to understand the use of force legal issues in this case, with a great deal of misunderstanding of both relevant law and how it should reasonably apply to the facts of the case. So he says, first, a quick overview of the facts of the Chad Reed shooting. It appears that Reed was upset because his ex-wife at the Caruth home had failed to deliver their son to Reed for his scheduled custody transfer. While in the front yard and later on the front porch of the Caruth home, Reed shouted and postured angrily at his ex-wife. Caruth ordered the angry Reed off his property. That's the Kyle guy. A command with which Reed declined to comply. Now I'm going to pause here. In the video, which it's all over the internet, Chad Reed, the father, never threatens anybody. He says, I'm going to take you to court. I believe that is the correct and appropriate statement. The father is there to pick up his son. It is his legal right, in fact, a court order to do so. The wife says he's not here because I want to be with him. The father says, I will take you to court and you to court and you to court. And then the other guy comes out with his carbine and says, get off my property. To me, at this point, it's really interesting. The father is supposed to be there, and they're not giving him his son, and he's worried about his son. He never threatened anybody. Could it be, and I think it's fair to say, if you then come out with a gun and say, get off my property, you are kidnapping the man's child, for which the father just gets in his face and closes the distance, potentially to reduce the threat that the firearm could pose. Then the other guy fires into the ground. Now he's directly firing at you. So then I believe Chad Reed is justified in trying to stop the threat as his son is being withheld from him, and he needs to get, I'll put it this way. If your kid is in some random guy's house and you're like, give me my son, I think you're justified to defend your child's life by stopping this stranger from having your kid. Now, the mother has custody too, but she was supposed to turn it over, so she's violating a court order. It gets interesting. Let's read more. Carruth entered his home and emerged a moment later back on the front porch carrying a carbine, a pistol caliber long gun, presumably to attempt to compel Reed to comply with his command to leave his property. At this point, in direct defiance of the court order the father has, threatening him by pulling out this gun. Here's where it gets challenging. I believe you have a right to keep and bear arms. And I do not believe by the simple act of having a gun, you are threatening anybody. I don't agree with that. If we have a right to keep and bear arms, I can be on my property holding a gun. And I can say whatever I want. Unless I say I will do X, there is no threat. If you brandish the weapon, okay, now there's a threat. But here's the challenge. Like I said, as much as I can respect that, if you are committing a crime or blocking someone from their child and you pull out a gun, now you're getting into murky territory because you have pulled out a weapon which expresses you will not give this man his child by threat of force. Not a threat to this man's life, but you're saying, I am willing to use this force. I have it here, and you will not see your child. Now you're asking for trouble. To step between a man and his son with a gun, don't be surprised when he closes the distance. And I'll tell you this, the fact the father only closed the distance and got in his face, surprising to me because, now you're getting crazy. The appearance of the carbine instead escalated the confrontation, with Reed jumping up onto the front of the porch, leading the two men to chest bump each other. Reed then reached for the carbine and appears to have used the leverage of the long gun to sling Carruth several feet from his own porch. Now, I got to stop. What Branca, he mentions later, but didn't point out in here, before there was a sling and separation, Carruth fired the gun into the ground. He fires it. Now, if you're a dad and your child is being withheld from you and a guy pulls out a gun and you get his face, granted, the dad did say, I dare you, mother effer, use it or something like that. No, well, now you're getting provocation, right? Granted, murky, right? Let me know what you think in the comments, because this is tricky. But then firing into the ground, that's not a warning shot. That's just you struggling and then boom, could have hit him in the leg and the foot. That's a direct attack. Now I feel like the dad grabbing it maybe makes sense. As Carruth came back to they fight over the gun. It slings Carruth several feet off his own porch. As Carruth came to a backpedaling stop some 10 feet or so from the porch and from Reed. Okay, so 10 feet. He raised his carbine, fires 2 shots into Reed, dropping him like a sack of potatoes, presumably the result of a hit on his central nervous system, and would succumb to the gunshot wounds. I'll start by saying up front, this is Branca, that this could very well have been a lawful use of deadly force by Carruth, but also that I can't make that justified call based solely on the 2 cell phone videos that we have been circulating, that have been circulating. So I'll jump down. There's some clips. There's nothing graphic in any of these images. He says, for it to be justified, it has to be defense of persons, defense of self-defense or defense of others, defense of highly defensible property, the home. But Texas is interesting. In Texas, you can use deadly force to protect mere personal property. Wow, Texas, yikes. I get it. I do. Because, the issue I take with this idea in many states where they're like, if someone's trying to steal your phone, you can't kill them. I'm like, dude, if someone threatens me and says, give me your phone, I don't know whether they're willing to escalate to deadly force to get it. The moment they make a felony attack on you or an attempt to destroy or take your property, they are committing an act of violence. And I should not be in the weakened position of maybe they'll kill me, maybe they won't. No. You attack me. Let me tell you guys something. Someone could shove you. No intent to kill. No intent to maim or cause great bodily harm. And you can stumble back, trip on a rock, bang your head on a curb and die. It happens. I should not be put in a position where I have the risk of death to myself and have to justify it in a courtroom. Look, all he did was shove you and you shot him. Yeah, but what if I would have slipped and fell and hit my head? What if he would have done it again? Why do I have to let someone attack me? That's Texas. In which case, when the dad grabbed the gun and threw the dude from his own porch, maybe the dude had a right to be like, I will not accept that this guy is attacking me on my property. So he shoots him. I still side with the dad here. The guy who was there for his son. And why? Because his son was being kept from him. If you think that you're going to hold a man's child and then be like, get off my property and brandish a gun, and that dad's not going to be like, how dare you? I will absolutely stop you to make sure I get my child. See, this is the issue here that I think needs to play into this, that, Branca's legal analysis doesn't necessarily cover the human element here. A father having his son taken from him. The child's mother saying, I'm not giving him to you per court order because I want to see him. You're kidnapping. You kidnap a kid, don't be surprised if the dad tries to stop you. And the dad's not the one who pulled out the gun. Branca says, I don't see any evidence in these two videos of Carruth being justified in the shooting death of Reed under any of those three legal justifications. So he gets into defense of persons or others. Now, the interesting thing here, I don't agree with, but I think Branca knows the law better than I do. So let's break this down. You've got the guy on his own porch, and someone gets in his face. They struggle. You fire a round into the ground. I mean, look, he's on your property. He's in your face. And this guy might be like, I don't know what their beef is. The guy and the wife, I don't know their court order. I don't know where the kid is. I don't know anything about it, right? So you come onto my property because someone's here, get in my face, threaten me. I told you to get off my property. Now you are threatening me up in my personal space. And, in Texas, you have a right to defend your home. I don't agree that the guy wasn't defending his home. The issue is, once they separated by about 10 feet, when I saw that video, I was like, that was the moment. You get in my face, you threaten me on my own property, don't be surprised. So what Branca points out, when it comes to defense of himself or the defense of property, as soon as Chad Reed, the father, bumps chest and starts yelling at him, threatening him, he could have stepped back and then shot him. That would have been like, this guy was in my grill threatening me on my own property. But when Carruth gained control of the situation, separated each other by about 10 feet, and then pop, pop, I was like, whoa. There's no evidence there was an imminent threat to him at that point. Like he had already secured his position. This is a challenging question for parents, parental rights, father's rights, use of force. Is this guy Kyle Carruth justified in shooting the dad because he was just attacked? I gotta say, man, if you are now on my property, standing at my door, you have thrown me from my own property, children are inside. There's some tough questions. Am I going to let this guy now gain entry to this building? Am I going to say this guy's already attacked me on my own property? I don't know what his deal is. He now has the ability to enter the property, or do I stop the threat now? It's a tough question. I got to be honest. I don't know. It's a tough. I'm ultimately going to side with the dad because this guy Carruth was acting as like a barrier between him and his son, and they're claiming his kid wasn't there. To escalate immediately in that regard, I think was wrong. There may be context we don't know about. Chad Reed may have been violent with this guy Kyle in the past, or who knows. And the guy Kyle might have been like, if he walks in this house, he's going to cause a problem. I got to protect my property. Here's why I ultimately think we need to consider defense of property, defense of his defensible property, his home, and self-defense and defense of others don't apply. This guy, I believe, should actually get some kind of manslaughter maybe, but I think it should be maybe a little bit more serious than that. And I'll tell you why. Now, again, I'm not one to indict and play that role for the state or anything like that. I probably would say not guilty, even if I was on the jury. But that being said, I know a lot of people, call it hypocritical or whatever. I just don't want to be the judge or the jury. But I'll give you my opinion. In the video, the guy, Carruth, who shoots the dad, is thrown from his own porch. He then aims the carbine at Reed and fires. No chicken wing. Arm down, right? The thing is, he's now firing a 9mm carbine, whatever, into his own home. So if it was defense of others, this guy's violating the fourth rule. Know what you're pointing at, what your target is, and what's beyond it. What was beyond it? A window with children in the house. Now that could be reckless endangerment. I don't know. Maybe he was using 9mm hollow points in that, and one of the reasons why they dropped this guy very, very quickly. I don't think you're going to be able to defend. You're going to be able to claim defense of others, defense of property and personal property when you were possibly damaging your own property, shooting into your own house where there were other people. I mean, It's challenging. It is, because with Kyle Rittenhouse, when he was firing on Rosenbaum, who was charging at him, they tried getting him on reckless endangerment of Richie McGinnis. But Richie chose to be there. If this guy was acting in self-defense, then you can't say he was acting recklessly, at least per Wisconsin. This is Texas. It's different. He could still be considered defending his house and his property by trying to stop a guy from entering it. Sure, the bullets may damage the door or the walls or whatever, but he was trying to stop this guy maybe from causing serious damage to his home and potentially getting access to other people or harming them. He is, however, standing in defiance of a court order. Yeah, this is a tough one, isn't it? How do you call it? Actually, I mean, you guys should be commenting already, telling me, what you think. Because, man, you got a dad who never threatened anybody, who's there on a court order, and this other guy blocking him from following through on what he was told he has to do, pick up his kid at 3:15. The guy now is aiding the mother who is in violation of a court order. When it came to Kyle Rittenhouse, they said, on the left, it can't be self-defense because Kyle couldn't legally have the gun, and thus, if you are in the commission of a crime, you can't claim self-defense if someone loses their life or they attack you or something. Now, in some circumstances, I believe that's true. That wasn't true with the Kyle Rittenhouse case, even with the gun charge. However, it turns out the gun charge didn't apply, and thus the argument was stupid anyway. In this regard, though, you have the guy Carruth on his porch abetting a mother who is violating a court order and could be argued to be kidnapping her son. I know maybe people say, no, it's not kidnapping because she wasn't taking the kid anywhere. But the kid wasn't there. The father, Chad Reed, was going to pick up his son. His son was not at this house. The wife said, the mother says, he's not here. And the dad says, why not? She said, I wanted to see him. Kidnapping, maybe? Now, all of a sudden, this guy comes out with a gun and says, get off my property. He is now abetting a woman who is committing a crime. Ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking it. Let's put it this way. A guy's in a bank, and he's just robbed it, and he's stolen a bunch of cash. And let's say you're in West Virginia, concealed carry state, constitutional carry. So you've got your gun with you, and you walk into this bank, and maybe the bank says, no guns allowed, or maybe they don't say anything. A lot of places they have no signs on them about guns. All right. So a guy robs the bank, and he's running out, and he's holding a bag. You don't know what it is. And the security guard grabs him and he goes, help, get this guy off me. So you pull out your gun and you say to the security guard, let go of him. And the guard goes, no. So then the guard gets in your face and he says, back off. You shoot the guard. Do you think you'll get charged with abetting a bank robber? Yes, you will. Now they might argue, you knew as a security guard, what are you doing? Maybe it was a plainclothes security guard. Maybe maybe it's not even a bank. Maybe you're somewhere and there is a mugger holding something and he screams, get this guy off me. And then you shoot him. And it turns out the guy who was on him was a plainclothes cop. Someone who was supposed to be there, supposed to be stopping this guy. You'll probably get in trouble. Now, truth be told, in that circumstance, maybe not so much, but probably I think you would still get in trouble. Now, in the Breonna Taylor case, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend did shoot a cop as he broke in, and he actually got the charges were dropped. So maybe in the case of you seeing a plainclothes cop, trying to stop a mugger, and you help the mugger, they might say no. But I think in certain circumstances, even if you don't know you're abetting a crime, you probably will still get charged, especially if you shoot and kill somebody. Now, the dad's not an agent of the government, so it's not maybe so fair to say a cop or anything like that. Plainclothes security, trying to keep a low profile, maybe. You've got a guy running after committing a crime, and actually there's some knowledge here. There's important knowledge here. Let's say you walk into a bank and someone is screaming, this guy is robbing the place, and then you pull out your gun and say, I don't care, and then shoot and kill the guy who was screaming, stop this guy, he's robbing the place. Maybe it's the bank manager or something. You're probably going to get charged for that. Now, ultimately, what Branca, breaks down is it does a really, really great analysis. I don't want to read through his entire analysis. I'm mostly talking about this because it was a viral video. I saw it and I had a lot of opinions on it. But he says Castle Doctrine does one thing and one thing only. It relieves the home defender of any otherwise existing generalized legal duty to retreat that might otherwise apply before the defender would be privileged to use defensive force. That is, if the defender would have had a legal duty to retreat before acting in self-defense while standing out in the middle of a public street, the defender is relieved of that duty. It no longer applies if the defender is instead inside his home or with his curtilage of the home. What a lot of commenters are saying is the guy Kyle should have called in the woman, the mother, said, get in the house now. Told the guy Reed, come back with the police. Apparently, Reed did already call the police. I think that was important. I probably should have brought that up earlier. That's what people are saying. Get in your house, close the door, say, get off my property. If you come in, I will use force to stop you. There are other people here, and whatever legal dispute you have with this woman, the police can resolve it. Please call them now. We don't want violence. Instead, he comes out on his porch with a gun and says, get off my property, barring the man from his child. Now, you can argue closing the door would do the same thing. It's a tough call on this one. The story came out, last week. The videos from the 10th, the incidents from the 10th or whatever. Now, here's where it gets crazy, and I'll wrap it up with this. I don't know. I had to talk about this story. Apparently, one of the kids has already said he blames the mother for the death of their father, and has said if this guy Caruth is around, they're going to run away, or the kid will run away, the oldest. Branca says it looks like manslaughter, not justified killing. In conclusion, based solely on these two videos, I fail to see a justification for Caruth's shooting of Reed as lawful defense of either self or others' property or highly defensible property, which would seem to leave Caruth with no justification at all for shooting Reed dead, the dad. An unjustified intentional killing of another is generally simply first-degree murder. That murder offense can, however, be mitigated to a lesser offense of voluntary manslaughter if the killer is believed to have been subject to adequate provocation, such that the decision to kill was not made in cold blood. And certainly I would expect a reasonable jury to accept the narrative of Reed having adequately provoked Caruth on the facts of the case. But he was saying, use it. He was telling him, come on, mother effer. Still, similar mitigation would occur under the legal doctrine of imperfect self-defense, also recognized by Texas courts, where the defender has a genuine but objectively unreasonable perception of the need to use deadly force. Still, both of those merely mitigate murder to voluntary manslaughter, not an acquittal. So the attorney for Mrs. Reed, the new wife of the guy who was killed, commented saying, thanks for bringing his attention to it on the YouTube video for the law of self-defense, Andrew Branca. He says prosecutors have essentially unlimited discretion on all these steps of the criminal justice process. Now, question, why wasn't the guy arrested already? He shot and killed the dude. Arrest him, take a statement, start an investigation. They didn't. People are saying that this guy who shot has like a relative or somebody who's a judge, a local judge or something. So we'll see. Mostly, I thought this was important to talk about for two reasons. Father's rights. I think it's a big role here, and I think it should be considered. I think we have to bring humanity to these courts and talk about compassion. I understand the need to be very precise in the law. That I accept. But come on, man. You tell a man he will not see his child, and the worst he does is he chest bumps you when you pull a gun on him, and then you kill him? I'm sorry, man. But I think the other issue to bring up here is it really is challenging. The self-defense argument here. You're on your own home and a guy comes and he's arguing about something. Can you defend your home? Considering the Arbery case, considering the Rittenhouse case, I thought it was great to bring this up and start that conversation. So comment below. Let me know what you think. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.